Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinel Report. We have a very special guest today. You get a lot of hate about America these days from the radical left, about America's oppressive and America's systematic racism and America's discrimination and America's all these terrible things. But there are people who have experienced other parts of the world. And I just got back from India literally like 30 minutes ago. And we've seen some different stuff. And so we have a very special guest joining us today to share why he loves America. He has one of the most interesting stories you've probably ever heard. His name is Christian Ray Flores. And he has this fascinating journey. He was a child refugee in Chile, raised by Marxist parents in Africa, became a top pop star in Russia, where he helped President Boris Yeltsin win a victory against the communists. And eventually he ended up in the United States, where he embraced the power of freedom and entrepreneurship and family values, became a successful entrepreneur and evangelist. And now he has a book, The Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America, a love letter from an immigrant. Christian, it's wonderful to have you on the program. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with the beginning. Why would you love America after experiencing all those different things? I mean, that's the dream of so many of the leftists. Get out of America. What is it about America that inspired you to write this book?
Well, I think mostly it's the freedom to choose. Really, the bottom line is the freedom to choose your own path, the freedom to have agency to build a new future. That's pretty much it. Like everything else is under that, right? And I think my theory is that most people that hate on America, not just criticize. Criticizing is fine, which is it's our duty to criticize our own country, right? But to hate on it, to want to leave it, to basically say it's completely unredeemable, that's just ridiculous. They haven't experienced the 72% of the population on the planet, maybe 76 even, lives under some sort of authoritarian regime. They haven't experienced the lack of freedom. They haven't experienced oppression. They haven't experienced the severe limitations and lack of opportunities that most people on the planet have. So that's basically it.
And talk to us a little bit about your experience. I mean, you experienced a little bit of everything: South America, Africa, Russia. Talk to us a little bit about that, how that informed your views on America and what we do have here.
Well, I think one of the main things that really stuck with me early on is just experiential. Early on in life, you're a child growing up, you find yourself in a refugee facility in Chile because your dad was in a concentration camp. We get kicked out of there. We go to Germany. We go to Russia. You see sort of the appalling conditions people live in. We lived in a communal apartment there. Then we moved to Africa. My dad gets a contract there. And we see sort of the aftermath of a civil war. We see a new civil war starting about a year in. And you see that reality. And of course, my parents were Marxists, so they would give me these sort of stories about the moral superiority of Marxism. But you see on the ground something very, very different. And then from a distance, you see just very basic cultural things like movies or TV shows or books. And you go, wait a minute, there's a different life that it seems like to be happening in a different dimension compared to what I do. And of course, when I grow up, we go back to Russia. I get a master's degree in economics. I study the stuff. I study Karl Marx. I study the theory behind it. I understand the economics of it. And I see how horrible it is, how absolutely, I would say, bankrupt it is, morally, economically, etc. And I see that change when the Soviet Union falls apart. And then there's this 10 years of actual free market there, which didn't last for long, but it was enough for me to go entrepreneurial. And I could have done business stuff and succeeded, but I did music and I became one of the top pop stars there across 15 different countries. And I saw that being sort of the authoritarian piece coming back in, where the communists were leading in the polls. Boris Yeltsin was trying to get reelected. And I had a #1 hit at the time called Our Generation. And Boris Yeltsin's team basically contacted us and said, can you rally with us for democracy, which is what we did, which is pretty ironic, right? That the son of communists would rally against the communists, literally on the mothership of communism. And that made for some very awkward conversations with the family. But I think through that sort of epic journey, what I saw in parallel was the freedom that America provided, the entrepreneurship, the liberty to choose, the economic opportunities. The faith piece was huge. I became a Christian maybe at age 26, at the peak of my career, and I started understanding how that even influences a whole society. You start paying attention to those things. Of course, the communists, they attempted to destroy God, essentially, just root it out of the culture altogether, and the effect was just devastating.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing, Christian. Talk to us about your journey to faith. I mean, I'm fascinated with this because, generally speaking, it's not always this way, but kids kind of go the way of their parents, especially their dad. And yet, you came to know the Lord, and now you even describe yourself as an evangelist. Talk to us about how that happened, and you mentioned the awkward conversations with the family. I mean, how did your family respond to that?
They were very surprised.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They were very surprised by my passion for free markets, for capitalism, for free enterprise, basically. But I was coming from a very genuine place. I was like, look, can't you see? This is the theory. This is the fruit. This is the theory over here. This is the fruit. What would you rather have? I would rather have this. I would rather have freedom, free enterprise, and the ability to chart my own path. When it comes to faith, thank you for asking. It was the other unusual part of my conversion story is that I actually came to God at the peak of my professional career. Usually, people crash before they become humbled enough to actually listen. But I was just humbled in a different way. Fame really, I would say, exacerbates and reveals a lot of the cracks in your character, and they became very obvious to me. I had a number one hit at the time. I was clinically depressed, and somebody just invited me to this church service. And at the time, I was actually fairly not only skeptical, but sort of critical of Christianity, because the brand of Christianity that I saw was really more. It wasn't really life changing. The things that I saw, right? So I just knew that little piece. And I came to this service and I met this guy who was a Canadian missionary, who courageously enough came to the Soviet Union before the fall and planted a church, and it sort of exploded, and it was like 10,000 members across a variety of different countries. One of my best friends now. And I saw his way of life, his demeanor, his family, his friendships. That's what spoke to me. And I literally we're having dinner one day, and I turned to him and I said, "How can I get what you have?" It was that clear to me. It was literally a revelation. And he said, "Well, I'll teach you from the Bible if you're willing to listen." And that was sort of the moment where I decided I'm going to trust this guy. I'm going to trust this guy, and I'm going to allow him to lead me and coach me. That's part of the reason why I'm an evangelist, I'm a pastor, but also a coach.
Oh, praise the Lord. What an incredible story, Christian. And so what would be your advice to parents who are dealing with children now that have been kind of indoctrinated by the teachers, by the social media, by the regular media to believe that America is this irredeemable, horrible place, and that it needs to be torn down and rebuilt, as I say, build back better? What would be your advice to parents who are dealing with children who now have fallen into that trap? I mean, obviously, get the book; it's a good starting point. But how do you reach kids who haven't been outside the United States and who have fallen into this just despair about all these alleged evils about the United States?
Well, you just actually answered your own question. What I did is I literally took them all over the world as they were growing up, because 2 out of 3 grew up mostly in America, so they're very, very, very American. The oldest one, moved when she was 12. And basically, I invested a lot of time in travel. And we would go to beautiful places, but we also would go to the slums of Mexico or Maputo, Mozambique, and they saw poverty, and they saw us do missionary work and help serving the poor. And as we traveled together, we told all these stories, right? I think the other thing is really being patient with them, because honestly, the sort of the wokeism is actually very appealing to someone who's very idealistic, right? Because it sort of pulls at these emotional strings of compassion, but the solutions are usually very destructive and oppressive. So when what they say is, if you're not a socialist when you're young, you don't have a heart. When you're not, if you're not a capitalist, when you're older, you don't have a brain, right? There's a natural evolution to these things. There's a reason why sort of these ideologies take hold much easier in colleges, right? Because we're very idealistic. But once we figure out, okay, this is how things like that work, then we sort of wake up to the reality that freedom and free enterprise are basically the way.
It's incredible that we're having this conversation now, Christian. As I mentioned, I literally just today returned from India, and I took my oldest son with me. It was a mission trip, and I thought, should I bring him? But he's lived most of his life in first world countries, very rich and developed countries. I thought, no, he needs to see how other people live in other countries so that it'll give him an appreciation. And I love that we're having this discussion right now. I think
you made the right move. Absolutely the right move. Expose them to the truth out there, right? Experientially, not just theoretically.
Yep, absolutely. And so, Christian, we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you. You mentioned legitimate criticism of America, and of course, I have plenty. I just, we spend a lot of time on this show talking about things that the government might be doing wrong, the culture might be doing wrong. What are some ideas that you may have for improving the United States? I mean, where have we gone wrong? Where can we do better as a country?
Well, I think beyond the things that are fairly on the surface, for example, I experientially felt the flaws and the sins of the nation when I was in Chile, because in Chile, there was a democratically elected socialist president, actually democratically elected, but because it was the height of the Cold War and the U.S. was freaking out about the communist sort of plague, they basically backed through the CIA a military dictator to overthrow the legitimately democratically elected president. So they were okay with a dictator who was sort of an ally and to overthrow and actually bomb. And I mean, tens of thousands of people suffered from it, and we were refugees because of it. So sort of this meddling, I think it's definitely something that needs to be re-examined, right, as an approach. I don't think it works really well. I would say influence is better than meddling. Influence is better than sort of corroding another government. So that's one thing that comes to mind because I was on the receiving end of that, right? But I think I would say the other pieces are, don't follow the European trajectory of secularism. I honestly don't think the American experiment works without faith at its core. It doesn't have to be a theocracy. It can't be a theocracy. It shouldn't be a theocracy. But I don't think it works without the Christian faith, the principles, the values at its core, So following that trend, that sort of trajectory of secularism, I think it guarantees disastrous results.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and our nation's founding fathers were also very, very clear about their vision for America, that was going to mind its own business. We were going to have peace and commerce and friendly relations with all countries, but none of this, we're the policemen of the world. And anytime there's a terror group or a civil war or something, we have to pick a side and get involved. You're right. It has really not worked very well. Fascinating, amazing discussion, Christian. What's the best way for people to get the book? It's called, folks, Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America, a love letter from an immigrant. Where's the best place to get that?
Just go to Amazon and either punch in this name that is a long name or just Christian Ray Flores, and you'll find the book right away.
Excellent. And is there some way for people to follow you? I know you've got a lot of followers on social media. What's the best way to keep in touch with the great work you're doing?
Oh, thank you for asking. ChristianRayFlores.com is the best URL because that's my newsletter. I post twice a week. Hopefully your audience will find it super valuable.
Excellent. Well, hey, we really appreciate you coming on the program. Thank you for sharing this incredible story. Thank you for writing the book, and I hope we can talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, folks, stay with us. We're going to be right back here on the Sentinel Report in just a moment.
In 1776, a nation was born, forged in the crucible of revolution. Brave men and women stood together fighting for freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. Introducing Patriot Mobile, the wireless carrier that stands with you. We are committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile. For free activation, use promo code Newman.